Welcome back to the Diary of a Fool's project. In the last episode, you might have seen part of the finished product, which was the card of the Fool. And today we're going right back to the beginning, to the chapter where I'm trying to find a topic for my thesis, which became the Creative Tarot. So I'll read out this chapter from the documentation, and you can just sit back and relax. Exit light, enter night. Take my hand, we're off to Never Neverland. Enter Sandman, Metallica, 1991. Erster Akt. Drum prüfe, wer sich ewig bindet, Fußnote, ob sich das Herz zum Herzen findet. Der Wahn ist kurz, die Reu ist lang. Das Lied von der Glocke, Friedrich Schiller, 1799, Kapitel 1. Finding a topic for the bachelor's thesis. Connecting the dots. Woohoo! Finally! Let's start with the actual text. What do you write a bachelor's thesis about in design? Do you want a collaboration, yes or no? And what's actually my thing? Let's connect the dots. Flashback. November 2023. I've been studying for a good 4 years. When I started, it was already certain that I would write my thesis in winter because I don't have time for stuff like that in summer. It was supposed to be winter 2022, the 7th semester, but back then no one knew that COVID would come along and ruin all my plans. So there's a footnote. And when I wrote that over a year ago, no one knew that the thesis would keep me occupied for over a year. So here we go. I've been thinking about the type and topic of my creative thesis, something practical, yay, for a long time. How long? I don't know. One of my first ideas was the resurrection of Eckweiler. That's a deserted village here in the Sohnwald, the local forest, of which only the church remains, in the middle of nowhere. It's a meditative place. It would be wonderful to add discrete signage and use AR elements to show what it used to look like before the residents were relocated. The idea fell apart this year. In spring, the Sohnwald-nahe Nature Park trained new nature and landscape guides. I was there and experienced just how slow the bureaucratic wheels can grind. Not the best conditions for a successful collaboration on a bachelor's thesis. My boss at the campsite where I live and work would have liked to employ me and my thesis for his tiny house project at some point. Research, conception, corporate design, and that's when I realized that I absolutely didn't want any kind of collaboration, successful or not. I didn't want more external pressure. I didn't want to fulfill expectations that weren't mine, or at least those of my professors. There's a footnote. Yeah, in the German version, this footnote explains that I don't do gender asterisks, which would be like writing professor as reader, as viewer, as this in English, and just use the simple male version for all human beings. This work should be mine. And 2 more things became clear. First, that I wanted to create something that I could finish, right to the bitter end. I still had 3 cool app projects to complete during my studies this year. I invested endless amounts of time, only to then shout finished with a click dummy in my hand. A click dummy isn't finished, a click dummy is a click dummy. And secondly, that the thesis should be something that's completely my thing. But what is that, my thing? My life consists of countless puzzle pieces, but none of them taken individually is what sets me on fire. The individual pieces just aren't enough. On the drive to my vacation this year, I listened to David Epstein's fantastic book, Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. What an encouragement. Maybe having a wide range of interests doesn't make you a hopeless freak after all. Maybe what others think to be indecisive fiddling around is perfectly fine. Maybe, just maybe, it's even something positive. Or, as Steve Jobs said in his Stanford speech, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. He urged, keep looking, don't settle. And of course, stay hungry, stay foolish. Thanks, Steve. I'll try to stick to that. So there's a source which I'll link in the description and 2 footnotes. I'm watching the video again to cite the source correctly. These 15 minutes tell you everything you need to know about life. Masterpiece. And yes, that was the inspiration for the title, In a Lucid Moment. Stay foolish. Okay, enough of the footnotes. And then I met with a colleague to prepare a guided herbal tour. No big deal. We casually talked about how to increase the likelihood that participants would remember the plants they found. He told me that in their wilderness education training, they draw the plants. Oh yeah. This idea formed my exam topic for the Nature Guide certification. And that's when I realized what my thing is. Creativity. Really? Can it be that simple? That's what my life revolves around over and over again. That's probably why I'm studying design. And I use creativity in my coachings too. Studying design doesn't just teach you design, Adobe Illustrator and the like. Above all, you learn how to think like a designer. Double diamond model, variations, speculative design practice, design thinking, of course. The mindset and thinking process behind design and the realization that it can be applied to much more than visual design is what fascinates me. But I've also noticed, both professionally and personally, how little many people use their creative abilities, starting with their imagination. And I know from my own experience and from many others that creativity can also be perceived as quite a burden. Yes, there are people who wish they had fewer ideas. There's a footnote? More footnotes. Well, yeah. Today I will explain and justify this in a completely different way. And hey, doesn't it actually take a coach/designer to tackle this complex topic and support people in the process? Wait, I can think of someone who fits the profile. Great. But can you make a creative thesis out of this? Isn't that too little or too much? And how can I implement it creatively with my skills, focus, and ideas? At the beginning of September, I held a personal branding workshop for my aspiring Nature Guide colleagues and created a small activity book for it, with questions for self-reflection, space for brainstorming, and some input. This gave rise to the thesis idea of an activity book for more creativity, whatever that means. Endless variations of the activity book theme followed. For a while, I thought a topic in the field of ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, could also be exciting. More brainstorming, more activity books. Until at some point I asked myself if I really couldn't come up with anything more clever than a stupid activity book. What medium would be better suited for more creativity than bound pages? Cards? Cards. You can draw cards, lay them out, combine them, play them, and reuse them again and again. You don't work through them in a linear fashion, but can interact with them much more freely, again and again, without a beginning or an end. That's much more in line with the nature of creativity than a book, isn't it? And wasn't there something? Didn't you want to... Oh dear. Design a tarot? The idea came to me a long time ago, long before studying design. I first held tarot cards in my hands as a teenager. Back then, I spent many cozy Sundays at my cousin's place. At some point, she unpacked her Aleister Crowley Tote Tarot. Always seeking and devoted to all things mysterious and occult, I was immediately captivated. The illustrations, by Lady Frida Harris, as I later discovered, were among the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. She allowed me to borrow her deck, and shortly thereafter I ordered my own with the accompanying book, hoping to someone make sense of the 78 cards. No luck there. It didn't really work out. It was far too complicated. At some point, the cards were forgotten. In some crisis, I dug them out again, tucked them away again in the bottom of the closet, found them again, ordered another stack of tarot books, drew daily cards, put them all away again, and so on. For years. Decades. About 3 years ago, the shaman next door sent me a photo of beautiful tarot cards with nature motifs. A pack of wolves, mushrooms in the forest. Nature is my petrol station, and I ordered the deck. The Witch's Wisdom Tarot by Phyllis Currett, artwork by Danielle Barlow. The accompanying book also suggests a suitable magical ritual for each card. By that point, I had already sold all my other decks and tarot books because they were either too superficial or too confusing and weird for me. Yes, it's a fine line. A little later, I was sitting in an online business workshop, and as a goodie, the speaker had asked one of the participants, a full-time tarot reader and teacher, to read the cards for us. As far as you could tell via Zoom, the cards were beautiful. The Lightseer's Tarot by Chris Ann. So that moved in with me too. Well, at some point, Witch's Wisdom and Lightseer's Tarot 2 disappeared somewhere at the back of the bookshelf, were brought out again, and so on and so forth. But somewhere in this long-term on-off relationship, I had this idea that I'd really like to create a tarot deck. Someday. Not because I'm still fascinated by the mystical and occult, but because I'm fascinated by the system of tarot. And the more I learned about it, the more fascinated I became. I like systems. And then at the end of the page, there's a large comment, which translates as, "Don't do it." And that was the first episode of the documentation. Next time we'll continue with an introduction into tarot, what the system is like, what cards are in a tarot, and what you can actually do with the cards. So maybe you enjoyed this. Hope you have a nice day.